I'm happy to be here. As I've been here on how many times have I come? Quite a number of times, I think. Yes. And always be happy to. Still high? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I'm very happy to be here, and I've had a chance to visit Pittsburgh on last few years. I'm very happy to meet with all of you, and happy to see the way the center here is growing, evolving, and how much good it is doing to sincere spiritual seekers in this part of the country. And as Hari mentioned, this weekend we'll take a look at Jnana Yoga. The handout that you have, that's some of the points mentioned in that handout. Those are some of the points we'll try to cover this weekend. And then by and large, that based on the book Knowing the Knower, which I wrote recently. Yoga is a popular term, and what most people understand when the word yoga is uttered is a set of asanas and exercises. But that's not the primary meaning of the term yoga. Yoga has two primary meanings according to Sanskrit language. One of the meaning of yoga is joining or union, and the other meaning of yoga is concentration. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he uses the word yoga as concentration. In Vedanta, in the Gita, the Upanishads, the word yoga is used primarily in the sense of joining. And here it is joining of the limited with the unlimited. The joining of the Jivatma, as they say in Sanskrit, with the Paramatma. Or in devotional language, it's the joining of the Bhakta with the Bhagwan, the devotee with God. And therefore, yoga means spiritual practice. Now, there is no one standard practice for all, because we know that while the goal might be same, God realization or becoming enlightened or becoming free from the limitations that we have at present, the ways to reach that goal are different, are many. And therefore, any spiritual practice which will help us attain the goal of life can be called yoga. Now, because there are many practices, attempts have been made to try to understand the vast yoga world, if you like. And so sometimes people speak about yogas as they are found in different books. What kind of practices we find, for instance, in the Upanishads, or in the Gita, or in the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and so on. Yogas, the four yogas, the formulation that there are four yogas is sometimes mistakenly thought to be a very ancient formulation in the Hindu tradition, which it is not. Dividing the entire yoga practices into four categories, this was primarily done by Swami Vivekananda. The terms that he used, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Karma Yoga, those terms are not new. Those terms have been used before. But Swamiji used them in a very special sense. And what he did was this, that no matter what spiritual practice we follow, not just in the Hindu tradition, but whether it's Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, any tradition, any spiritual practice in any part of the world, as human beings, our primary instrument is the body and the mind. Other than that, we don't have anything. And therefore, what Swamiji did was, he looked at the primary functions of the human mind. And the mind that we have has three primary functions. The first is what we sometimes call the affective function, the function that deals with the power of emotions and feelings. The second is the cognitive function, which uses the power of reasoning and logic. And third is called the conative function, the willpower. So the mind has these three powers, manifested through emotions, manifested through reasoning, and manifested through will. Now different spiritual practices predominantly use different functions of the mind. So that those practices which predominantly use the power of emotions, the power of feelings, Swami Vivekananda said, all of those practices come under the category of Bhakti Yoga. All of the practices which predominantly use the power of reasoning, the power of logic, Swamiji said, all of them come under Jnana Yoga. Now those practices which use the willpower as applied in the external world through the work that we do, that comes under Karma Yoga. And those practices which use willpower to apply in the internal world to deal with the mind and how the mind functions, he called it Raja Yoga. So that's how these four yogas have come into being. Now what we are going to do this weekend is looking at only one section of it, and that is Jnana Yoga. And that's the advantage of retreats like this, that it gives us a chance to focus on one specific subject. So we are not dealing with spiritual life in general. We are now looking at specifically one kind of practice. And in order for us to benefit from this deeply looking at one practice, it's very important that we pay careful attention. Because all of what I'm going to say is very interconnected or interlinked. And if you pay attention from the beginning, I'll go very slowly, very carefully. If you pay attention from the beginning, it should all make sense. But if you kind of go on and off in the middle, then if you miss the continuity, then it will be a little bit difficult. So first about knowledge itself. In the Upanishads, in one place, there is one student goes to a teacher and asks this question: what is that knowing which everything can be known? Kasminnu bhagavo vijñāte sarvamidam vijñātam bhavati. The question was simple. We look around us in the world and we find there are so many things to know. If you go to a library and you find there are hundreds of books, and if you ask yourself, how many of these books have I really read? And it can be a very humbling experience to know that there is so much to know and how little I know. And so, since our time and energy are limited, and there is so much to know, and if we want to know everything, we just don't have the time for it. We just don't have the energy for it. And that's why this question, is there any one thing if I know, I will know everything? Sometimes those of us most of us nowadays in effect, who use the internet, we know the difficulties people have when we are asked to sign up and use a password. Now, if you are signing up in 100 different places, to find 100 different passwords is difficult. Most people end up just using one common password everywhere, which again is not very secure. From a security standpoint, that's not a very advisable thing. So normally they say don't have one password, have different passwords. If you have different passwords, how are you going to remember it? And then old-fashioned way was to kind of write them all down. And then of course you might lose it or somebody else may find it. And so human brain being very creative, now they have found what they call password managers. So you need to then store all your passwords in one app, and all that you need to know is just one password, one master password. If you know that, then you have access to all your other passwords. Or if you have to take care of a bunch of keys, then carrying a big bunch of keys can be a nuisance. Then we say, can I have a master key? A master key that will open every room in my home. So similarly, is there any one master knowledge, knowing which I will know everything? Now we may not realize this, but consciously or unconsciously, the desire to know is very natural to all of us. Right from the time we were born as little babies, you can see a baby just looking up here and there. So the desire to know is very, very, very natural. The only difference is in some people it manifests in a very conscious way, and many others it's very unconscious. In some people it might be very intense, and some people it may not be so. But the desire for knowledge is present in all of us. So here is the basic question: what is knowledge? Now, giving a definition of knowledge may not be so easy, but we know what knowledge does. We know that knowledge can be a very liberating experience. Knowledge is something that can bring us great joy. Knowledge is something that can bring us great relief. If you have misplaced your keys, what it really means, you are ignorant about where your keys are. And then you search for it everywhere, and then once you find out, once you have the knowledge, oh, my key is here, then you can see how relieved you feel. All of us have misplaced things, and we know how happy we feel when we get them. So this knowledge, which is so natural among all, how does knowledge come? What are the doorways to knowledge? Now, knowledge essentially comes to all of us through 5 windows, if you like. There are 5 kinds of ways knowledge enters into our life. There are the knowledge of there is a visual knowledge, all the color and sights and form. There is the knowledge that comes through sound, the knowledge that comes through taste, the knowledge that comes through touch, and the knowledge that comes through smell. Now these are the 5 senses that we have. And since knowledge comes to us through these 5 senses, these are therefore called senses of knowledge. So sense is indriya, knowledge is jnana. So these are called jnanendriyas. Now if any one of these indriyas is non-functional or can become defective, that avenue of knowledge then gets cut off. So if I am short of hearing, then the knowledge that could have come to me through sound becomes obstructed. But these are the ways knowledge comes to us. Now, there are 2 kinds of knowledges if you look at it this way. One is the knowledge of the external world. a knowledge about everything that comes from outside. And then there is knowledge which comes from the inside. For instance, what is going on inside my mind? What kind of thoughts I have? What kind of ideas I have? That belongs to the internal world. That's the inner knowledge. And external knowledge is what's happening around me. Now, all of this knowledge, it's a very indirect process if you look at it. For instance, now, I'm speaking and you are hearing, and it just seems like this is so direct. But actually, it's not as direct as we think it is. For instance, the thoughts in my mind, I'm now converting the thoughts in my mind into words, and I'm uttering those words. Now those words are they are producing a sound. Those sound waves are reaching to your ears. Now that impression, whatever sound you are hearing, that gets then conveyed through your mind to your brain, and the brain then, if it understands the language in which those words are being spoken, then reconverts those sound into words into the ideas that they represent. And therefore, even this simple act of speaking and listening is a very indirect process, because it gets filtered through our senses, through our mind of the speaker, and then again back into the senses and mind of the listener. That's why someone said modern education is that mysterious process by which information is transferred from the notes of from the professor's diary to the notebooks of students without entering the heads of either of them. So a lot of the knowledge that we speak about today is more information. Information is useful, but information by itself is never enough. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the what do you say for Panjika in English? Almanac. Yeah. So an almanac might have a forecast for how much rain there is going to be or what are going to happen. Now that's a lot of information there, but it may have information about the rain, but no matter how much you squeeze that almanac, not a drop of water will come. So similarly, again, you might have information about, say, how to prepare a good cup of coffee. Now you have all the theoretical knowledge about it, but still, that knowledge itself will not bring you a cup of coffee. You'll have to actually go and do it, fix that cup of coffee. So similarly, information is useful, but information itself may never be enough. Now, all the so-called knowledge that we get through lectures, through retreats, through books, even the knowledge that we seems to come from the Vedas, from all the scriptures, whether it's of the Hindus, Muslims, Christians, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, all these are considered revealed texts. But all of these still come under information. And therefore, they are referred to in the Vedas as lower knowledge, apara vidya, because all of this knowledge gets filtered through the senses and the mind. Now, if all of this is lower knowledge, if all of this is information, then what is higher knowledge? Now, higher knowledge is that which bypasses the senses and the mind. Knowledge is direct. It doesn't have, that's the kind of knowledge that can change our life. That's the kind of knowledge that will give us God realization. So we have to be very clear about this, that whatever we are studying now, even through this retreat or through books, is good, is useful, but it's still lower knowledge. Now, whatever information we might get through our studies, through listening to lectures and so on, if we try to live according to it, if it becomes a part of our life, it's not enough to know, be honest and good. That's great information. Great, but I have to actually live honestly. I have to actually live truthfully. Only then can my character change. Only then can my life change. Now, one of the things that we will see is that knowledge is a very personal activity. By personal activity, I mean that if I have to know something, I have to be the knower. But nobody else can do it for me. For instance, if I need to go and mow the lawn and I feel lazy today or I don't feel like doing it, I can ask somebody else, can you just go and do it for me? That's possible. A lot of things can be done on behalf of us by someone else. But knowledge, getting knowledge, you can't say, oh, I want to know what time it is, but I'm feeling lazy today. Can you just go and know it for me? But that person will know, but that person's knowing doesn't help me. So knowing is a very, very personal activity. What we quickly realize is that while the objects of knowledge are many, the subject, the one who is trying to know, is always me. So, in everything that we do in life, there are always these three entities involved. There is the subject, there is the object, and there is the action that is committed. For instance, if you're reading a book, the book is an object, I am the subject, and reading, that action, connects me with that book. So similarly, knowledge, if I'm trying to know something, then there is the object of knowledge, there is the act of knowing, and there is the knower. Now, as I said, since knowing is a very personal activity, I am the knower. Then the question is, who is this I? Now, that is one of the questions that came into the human mind long, long back. It seems natural that if we try to imagine what may have happened, it's easy to look at the world and ask, from where did all this come? How did all this come? And we know people have tried to find answers to that. And that's how the kind of questions that are asked in science. How did all this come about? And then there is the theory of evolution, and we hear about Big Bang and string theory and how it all began and so on. So this question has been asked, how did all this come about and so on. But what some people at ancient times realized, that no matter how often we ask that question, how and when did this come about, we'll never solve the problem completely. It will never give us a definitive answer to it. Even today there is not just one definitive theory about how this material world has come. So if it has not happened so far, we can imagine, well, there will one day come a time when everyone will agree that this is how the world has come about. Seems very unlikely. Since for every issue we have at least 10 different opinions on it. So it seems very unlikely whether there ever come a time. So a few people in very ancient times then realized that before we try to figure out how this world has come about, we need to ask a more fundamental question. And that is, who is this person who is asking the question about the world? So let me first inquire into who I am. Since I am the knower, these are all objects of my knowledge, but I am the knower. So who am I? And if we ask that question to ourselves, we know. You just close your eyes and repeat the word I. And we, of course, we use the word I all the time. So what exactly do we mean by this I? Who is this I? So when I say I'm sitting here, who is exactly sitting here? Well, I mean, one obviously, clearly, this body is sitting here. This human body is sitting here. And I see this human body as me. That is why I can say, well, I'm sitting here. So the body is clearly who I am. Otherwise, how can I say I'm sitting here? But we know also that we are not just the body. We know that there are other things in me which are different from the body. There are things in me which no surgeon will find if the body is cut open. My thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, my sense of I, my memories, none of these are part of the body. And so collectively we can say, well, sometimes we just say that's the mind, or that's the invisible part of me. So the body is the visible part, then there is the invisible part. The question now is there anything more in my me besides the body and the mind? And at this point, I think there is a divergence from the material science and what we might say a spiritual science. Because, in fact, there's a divergence even before. There are some who don't even accept the presence of the mind. So there is a theory that this body is all that there is. What we think of as mind may be nothing but just the reactions occurring in the brain. And so they have been able to identify which part of the brain deals with emotions and memories and so on. And so there are people who think that the mind and ego are just our imaginations of Atman, imaginations, that there really isn't anything separate entity called mind or ego. These are all these chemical reactions occurring in the brain, which we call mind, but this is all there is. And so what this way of thinking does is that sometimes this is called the neuro-reductionist view, that is reducing everything that is happening in human life to just this few neurological activity going on in the brain. That's it. And as long as the brain is functioning, all this drama will continue. When there is death, the brain ends, the heart stops, that's the end. There is no sequel. Nothing happens after that. That's the end. But that's one view. But there are others who believe, no, that's not all. Some say, no, there is behind this body, there is a subtle entity called the mind and the ego. But they may not believe that there is anything beyond that. Now, what the Upanishads and the Vedas say, that in addition to this visible body, this invisible mind, there is third something. And that third something, in Sanskrit, is simply called the Atman. And the word Atman simply means self, or simply means, the self, me. And so right now we can say that there are three in one. There is the visible me, the body. There is the invisible me, the mind and so on. And then for those who believe that there is a spiritual me. Now, we don't feel that we are three people unless there is some personality issues there. What they call multiple personalities. You suddenly feel that there are two or three of you. But in general, we say as normal human beings, we just feel I'm one person. And yet we seem to have these three parts. So how are these three related among themselves? The body, mind and Atman. Now the body and mind, while they seem to be different, and they are different in some ways. Well, for instance, I can see the body, I don't see the mind. But in most other respects, they are pretty much same. They both are material according to Vedic thinking. And because they are material, they act and interact upon each other. That is why what happens to the body affects the mind, and what happens to the mind affects the body. We know that both can get tired. Both, if you put junk in the body falls sick. If you put junk in the mind falls sick. Both have their doctors. So there is a brain fatigue, there is the mind fatigue, there is the body fatigue. So in every respect they are identical. The only thing is you see one, you don't see the other, because the mind is said to be very subtle, sukshma. Now, science has identified some subatomic particles, whether it's with atoms and molecules, or even further going down, neutrons and so on, electrons and protons. Now, the mind is even more subtle than that. So there hasn't been yet, at least, any scientific instrument by which you're able to see the mind, but that doesn't make it non-material. What the Vedas say, what the Upanishads say, is that the me, the third spiritual me, is not material. So the only non-material part of me is the Atman. And then these two, material body and mind, are coverings over the Atman. Just like the clothes are covering over the body itself and the mind itself is a covering over the Atman. Now, the Atman, we know the Atman is different from the body and mind, but what is it really? And if we have to use a word to say what the Atman is, the best word probably is consciousness. Now, consciousness is a term that is that means many things to many people. For those with a materialist view, consciousness is a byproduct of the brain. So they feel it's the neurological function in the brain which produces consciousness, and therefore when the brain stops, consciousness ends and everything ends. Now, what Vedanta says is that no, consciousness is not dependent on the brain. Consciousness is completely independent. Consciousness, normally when we use the word consciousness, we always seem to imagine that an object is implied. I'm conscious of a table, I'm conscious of a chair. So we seem to think that consciousness always needs an object. Now what Vedanta, the ideas which are described in the Gita and the Upanishads say, is that consciousness can be without an object. It doesn't need an object. It's like light. Now, we can see everyone and everything in this room because there is light. If it were darkness, we wouldn't be able to see anything. Now, we cannot see light. Light cannot be seen. What we can see are only objects illumined by light. But light itself is not seen. And yet, light doesn't depend on an object. It's like this. Now, during day, the sun's light illumines everything. We're able to see everything because of the light of the sun. Now, what if all of this completely disappeared? Will the sun say, oh, what use is my light? There is nothing now to shine, so let me just now switch off. The thing is that the light of the sun does not depend on the world that it illumines. Even if there is nothing, the sun will still continue to shine. So, just as light doesn't depend on its objects, consciousness does not depend on object. So consciousness, I can be conscious of a table, I can be conscious of a chair, but even if there is no object, consciousness itself can be without an object. What I am, what every one of us is this pure consciousness. That's why the word pure is sometimes used. That is consciousness itself, not consciousness permanently linked to some object. So the Atman is this pure consciousness. Now at present, our body and mind appear to be conscious, but the consciousness of the body and mind doesn't belong to the body and mind. It's like this. It's like, we have the bulb and the tube light. Now the light doesn't belong to the bulb. The electric power, that's what's producing the light. But without the power, the bulb is useless. So, but right now the bulb seems to be giving light, although the light doesn't belong to the bulb itself. Exactly in the same way, right now the body and mind appear to be conscious, but the consciousness of the body and mind doesn't belong to the body and mind. The real power of consciousness, the real consciousness is coming from the Atman. And that is why when a person dies, the body doesn't disappear, the body is still there. But the body is not conscious because that conscious entity which was inside the body has now left the body. And that's why when a person dies, we say, "Oh, where have you left me? I'm gone." Now, what does that mean? It means that we know that the person was not the body. Because if the person were the body, we wouldn't have said, "Why have you left me?" Because you're still here, lying down right in front of me. So, in our sane moments, we kind of realize that we are different from the body, but that's what the ignorance really means. That if we think calmly, think carefully, it's not difficult to know we are different from the body. But most of the times we are not thinking calmly, we are not thinking carefully. And that's why 99% of the time we go about in our lives thinking that I am this body, I am this mind. And that's why we suffer. Because all of the problems that we have in life, these problems are connected either with the body or with the mind. And if the body and mind are taken out, temporarily at least, we have no problem. Such as when you are fast asleep. No matter how many physical or emotional or mental problems we might have, when you fall asleep, the problems may show itself through the kind of dreams that you have. But every night there is a small phase when we are not even dreaming. That's called deep sleep. It's called sushupti. Now in that state of deep sleep, we are unaware of our body and mind. And therefore, in that state of deep sleep, we don't have any problem. You are in bliss in deep sleep. Given a choice, many of us would prefer to stay in deep sleep. Unfortunately, we can't. We are forced to wake up. So sometimes the question is asked, even if you don't put an alarm, even if you don't want to wake up, what is it that wakes you up? Suppose you say, next 2 days I'm completely free. I'm just going to now sleep for 3 days. Sometimes people say things like that. They're not able to sleep. Now how long can you sleep? 10 hours, 15 hours, and then you wake up. So the question that gets asked is, what is it that wakes me up? Even if no one comes and disturbs me, there is no alarm, there is nothing, and still I wake up. And the answer that is given is, well, it's your karma that wakes you up. Because you have been in this complete bliss now in deep sleep, and your karma says, wake up, you have some more pain and suffering. And then you wake up. And then when you kind of body and mind get tired, there's been now too much of stress and worry and anxiety. You said, okay, now go and sleep for a few hours, and then I'll wake you up again for more suffering. Now what the goal of Jnana Yoga is this. It's a simple observation that in deep sleep, I don't have this awareness that this is me, this body is mine, this mind is mine. Because I don't look upon the body as me, don't look upon the mind as me, I'm totally in bliss. Unfortunately, as we saw, that blissful state is not within our control. It ends on its own, and it's an unconscious state. In deep sleep, I'm not conscious. So the challenge is, can I recreate that deep sleep experience, but in a very conscious way? And I can get it under my control so that it'll never go away. Right now, deep sleep is not within our control. We don't know when we go into it. We don't know when we come. Well, we don't have any control about when we come out of it. And the goal of Jnana Yoga is consciously, can I find a way to consciously look within me, know that this is not me, this is not, the mind is not me, the body is not me, and then in bliss. What this will do, and what this has done to people who have experienced that, is that you become completely free from all problems. Death will no longer have any fear for you, because death of what? I mean, what is death? Death means this body, which is now seems to be doing its job, stops doing its job. It becomes non-functional. Let's say if you have if you have a computer, if you have a car, if your car stops doing its job, you might get a little bit irritated. It might cause a little bit inconvenience, but you don't feel like, oh, I am dead. You don't feel that way, because you know you are not the car. The car is useful, the car is a good instrument, but you are not the car. Exactly in the same way, can we develop this awareness that the body is useful, the mind is useful, but I am not the body. The body and the mind are as much my instruments as my car and my computer. That's one of the practices in Jnana Yoga. So all of this knowledge that we get, I spoke earlier about knowledge. Now most of the knowledge, what we understand by the word knowledge, is really a kind of classification. It's like pigeonholes. So there are these pigeonholes like boxes inside our mind, and they are labeled. So if I suddenly come across, say if I open my eyes and I suddenly see a form in front of me, and what my mind is really doing is my eyes scan that form, send that information to the brain, and in my mind then all of these categories are there. I immediately compare and say, oh, this form looks like an animal. So I get the knowledge then, oh, this is an animal. And I look more deeply and I say, let me look deeply. And then suddenly I find that there are some existing impressions in my mind which tally. This form looks like a dog impression in my mind. And then I have a knowledge, oh, this is a dog. So all of the knowledge that we have on the objective world is really nothing but comparing the new impressions that we have with the existing impressions in the mind. And if there is some impression that comes and I don't have any corresponding impression in the mind, then I say, oh, who is this? Well, I don't know. All that I can say, but let you meet a stranger. Well, you have some knowledge. One knowledge you have is, well, this is a human being, because there are human impressions in my mind, and I'm able to compare it and say, well, this is a human being. But say, well, of course he's a human being. Who is that? and I'm not able to figure out. And then somebody has to say, oh, this is this person, this gentleman, and then you kind of get more information about that person. So, all knowledge is classification and categorization. Now, times when we are not able to categorize things, not able to figure out to which box that label belongs, then that is called ignorance. So, knowledge and ignorance are opposites. So, if I'm able to find a corresponding impression, I call it knowledge. If I'm not able to find it, I call it ignorance. And ignorance is, again, like knowledge, very difficult to define. But we know what ignorance does. Ignorance is a very weakening, confusing state of mind. From the other day, I was speaking with one person who had never before traveled alone, and he had to pass through Heathrow airport. And the first time in his life, he has to now change flights at Heathrow, and he has heard Heathrow is such a busy airport. And this person was terrified. And terrified because of ignorance. He's like, well, I've never done this before. And I don't know, I'm confused, I'm bewildered. Now that's what this is a kind of just one example. But any kind of an ignorance, this is what we notice. So ignorance and knowledge are opposites, just like light and darkness. But ignorance is not simply the absence of knowledge. Ignorance is positive something. So don't think of knowledge as ignorance as simply absence of knowledge. But what ignorance is very difficult to define. Very difficult to say whether it is or it is not. It's very, very mysterious. And this mysterious nature of ignorance that is called by the term Maya in Vedanta. In Sanskrit, Maya, if you go to the etymology of the term itself, Maya really means that which is not. So that which appears to exist but really doesn't exist. And that mysterious kind of ignorance has covered all of us. And that covering has made life very irrational, very illogical. Most of us like to think that we are very logical people. And human beings especially think, we are more evolved. Which is, all of our philosophy is really a very human explanation of the world. There's a long back, there was one cartoon I saw of a monkey, a baby monkey with her mother sitting on a tree. And the tree was in a place where there were little children playing below. And that little baby monkey tells her mother, "Mother, I want to go and play with those children." And the mother tells them, "No, you shouldn't go and play, but those are all human babies playing there." And so the monkey mother says, "No, you should never go and play with them. They are not even evolved yet. They don't even have a tail." So again, it's a human way of explaining evolution is, we had tail first and now it's gone and we are more evolved. Maybe if monkeys had their own way of understanding evolution, they might think these people are not evolved yet. So when they become evolved, then they will have tail one day. Again, it depends on which way you turn the ladder. So we may not be as rational and as logical people as we think we are. In fact, we probably may be the stupidest people. That's not a very complimentary thing to say. But think about it this way. all of us make plans in life. You plan about what I want to do tomorrow, what my plan is for this weekend, what my plan is for next summer. We have plans about everything. And we know sooner or later, especially as we grow older, that plans are just plans, because how many of our plans work out exactly the way we thought they would? Because there are so many factors over which we have so limited control that some of the things that we planned may turn out to be the way we thought they would. Most of the things either don't turn out at all or turn out in a very different way. So much of our time and energy are spent in pursuing plans and objects which may never happen or may happen in a very different way. But there is one thing that's definitely going to happen in our life, and we have no plan for it, and that's death. One day we are all going to die. It's a very unpleasant topic. Nobody wants to talk about it. But if we don't talk about it, doesn't mean it won't happen. But we don't have any plan for it. Now, a real wisdom would be, there are things in life which may not happen, but this is one thing that's definitely going to happen. And worse, I don't even know when it's going to happen. And therefore it's very urgent, because it will happen within the next 5 minutes, or maybe after 50 years. We don't know. We don't want it to happen too soon, but still we don't know. But a wise person would say, if it is something that's definitely going to happen, let me have some plan for it. Otherwise, I will be taken unawares. But most people don't want to think about it. That's why Maya, that's why it's called Maya. Think about the pursuit of, in fact, we have in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights and in the Declaration of Freedom, you see the pursuit of happiness. And of course, everyone wants to be happy. But we also know that the more we strive for happiness, the more it eludes us. We strive, how much of our time and energy and everything is spent running after things, wanting things, and then one day, with no warning, suddenly everything is taken away from us. Again, but we cannot stop ourselves from wanting things even when we know that it is bringing us more pain and more suffering. Sometimes it's not as if we are not as stupid as I initially said. That was a very, very, very rash way of saying it. But we are stupid because sometimes we know something is bringing us pain, but in spite of knowing it, we can't stop ourselves from doing it. Think about sometimes when doctors say, it's too much sugar in your blood, no more sweets. There are people who know that, well, more sugar is not good for them, but they can't stop themselves from eating it. Every cigarette packet now has a statutory warning how it's injurious to health. We know the harmful effect of tobacco. And yet, it's not that people don't know, but in spite of knowing, we can't stop ourselves. But that's what addiction means, that we know that it's not good for us, that it's destroying us, and yet we cannot stop ourselves from it. Well, that's Maya again. Power. We know that people run after power. They want the power to control. But we also see that all this running after wealth, after power, after pleasure, people who already have wealth, people who already have power, are they happy? Are they contented? We see that there's so much unhappiness, even people who are millionaires and billionaires. And yet, somehow we feel, well, it's them. That won't happen to me. I'm different. And yet we run after, well, that's Maya. So this kind of a mysterious clouding of our intellect that has occurred by which we live in a very irrational, unreasonable way, that is how ignorance comes. And the quest in Jnana Yoga is to acquire knowledge so that this kind of a ignorance that has come over us will be removed. So before I go any further, I'll stop at this moment. If you have any thoughts or ideas or questions, or if anything that I have said would need more explanation, you can feel free to ask. Yeah.
I really like all the topics that you mentioned. Among the questions I have, I would mention one. When you mentioned mind, consciousness, the body, and Atman, you specifically refer to only human beings in general, or if you talk about all living beings, how do you define life, and where would you put a boundary between life and not life, especially in the purview of science?
Well, I'm not a scientist, so I can't say from the science. So what I would say is that it's again, it's a very, the boundary can be, it's a very humanly, the boundary would depend on how you define life, how you define consciousness. And there have been, some people go up to plants and animals for life, but there have been studies, Jagdish Chandra Bose did it in the late 19th century, about how even metals and stone show reactions. So again, it's a very difficult question to objectively prove. Some people might say they have life, some people might stop with plant, some people, but consciousness, please sit down. Now, consciousness is very interesting. The truth is this, consciousness always means self-consciousness, because we can never be conscious of anybody else's consciousness. We can be conscious of only our own consciousness. So even that whether you are a conscious being, I don't have direct knowledge of that. So whether you are a conscious being is only an inference, because you seem to be moving and talking like I do, therefore you may. But sometime now, there could be all these, you already have movies like The Terminator and all of that, and seem to be moving like us, but they are not really conscious beings in the sense we understand it, right? So again, what I mean is, science sometimes, because it equates consciousness as a byproduct of the brain, it refers to consciousness in others. But consciousness that is understood in Vedanta is always self-consciousness. So when I say that this is a chair, what I'm really saying is that I am conscious that this is a chair. Because consciousness is a precursor for any knowledge. No consciousness, no knowledge. You see? And therefore, what to speak of, you asked about the boundary of consciousness. Really, from the way I have explained it, I am only aware of my own consciousness. All other consciousness, even of consciousness of other human beings, is only an inference. That's how I would put it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Swamiji, we're talking about Maya. I have one question for me. Is bondage and attachment to people, do they come under Maya? Or because of Maya?
Yes. Because the real me is the Atman. Now, I don't see myself as the Atman, I see myself as the body and mind. Now that happens because of Maya. Because the Atma is birthless and deathless. It's never born, never dies, it's pure, free, happy and perfect. Now if I knew that, if I had that knowledge, I would feel I'm never going to die. I'm an eternal being. Right now, I don't feel I'm an eternal being, I just feel I'm a human being. And why does that human being come? that idea that I'm a human being come because I'm identified with the human body and the human mind. I see this as me, I see the mind as me. I see this as me when this is not me. So that's what ignorance is. Knowledge would be, this is not me. Ignorance is, this is me. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, there.
Swamiji, I have a question about Maya also. Is Maya a part of the human body and intellect, or so that if it is, then when this body dies, the Maya also dies?
No.
So
Maya is ignorance. Maya is not part of the body.
So does it belong to consciousness?
Pardon?
Does the Maya, does it belong to consciousness,
Well, it depends on what you mean belongs to.
or is part of it?
Well, philosophically, no, it's not a part of consciousness. It's just that consciousness is somehow gotten dimmed, covered by it, eclipsed, just like the solar eclipse we had. So the moon is not really a part of the sun. The moon was only covering the sun. In the same way, Maya is covering the Atman.
And one question I have is, so okay, if we start thinking I am not the body and that, so that results into I am Brahman, okay? But if you think about that, okay, let's say I start thinking I am Brahman, but I have no say in what Brahman does. Like I to take birth was not my conscious decision. What size body and all that, nothing is my decision. Brahman does what Brahman does, and there is no saying whatsoever. One has no say. That's why it's hard to identify with Brahman, because it does its own thing.
No need to identify with Brahman. Just disidentify with the body.
Okay, that leave. Yeah, that's right. But we need something to hang on to. That
No, just hang on to yourself. Hang on to your real self, and then you discover what that self is. You don't have to go with a preconceived idea of who that self might be. All that you need to say, well, this is not me. That's it. And that's what really practice of Jnana Yoga is, finding out who the real me is, rejecting the unreal me and finding out the real me. That's it.
I have another question. Thank you. So this one, I have thought about this a lot. So I was like all of us in this room, I was born from a mom. I like her very much. So my question here would be, at one point in time, I was a single cell in my mom's body. Now I'm this like big 5 foot 10-inch person. So I have an Atman. My mom had an Atman. So could you talk about how would you see this event from the perspective of birth or something? Does the Atman explain what happened to this creation of a separate Atman from my mom's body? This entire Atman was at one point in time a single cell in my mom's body.
No. You don't have an Atman. You are the Atman. You have a body.
But now there are two bodies in place of one. It used to be only one person, my mother. Now it's two bodies. I, my mother. I also have a sister. So it's like as many children my mom would keep on giving birth to. So there are as many different bodies which all have the creation in one single body. In this case, my mother.
No, it's like this. So it's a good question. So what happens when a person dies? Okay, so now I said we have a body, we have the mind, and of course there is the Atman. Without the Atman, the body and mind with themselves wouldn't exist. So when what we call death really means the physical body stops functioning. What remains? The mind is still there. The mind doesn't die. Death doesn't mean death of the mind. So that the mind and the Atman are still there. So it's the mind and the Atman that leave the body, and the body lies unconscious, and then people cremate it and bury it. So it's what takes birth is this mind inside which the Atman is there. So that mind in the Atman then enters into the body of a male, enters into a male body through food, through rain, through all of these ways. Then from the male body, that Atman and the mind is transferred into the female body. And there it finds this material in which this additional covering. So the Atman is already the covering of the mind. In addition, it gets now the covering of the body. And as the cells multiply, then that physical covering grows and becomes bigger. So that's how it is. So the Atman is not being created. Atman already is. Atman is indestructible. And Atman and the mind always remain. And what gets created is only this external visible body. That's how it occurs.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. And then what kind of body it will get will depend on what kind of body that Atman and the mind enter into. So the Atman and the mind, say after death, if it enters into a dog's body, then the body it will acquire, that Atman and mind will acquire a dog's body. So it's not necessary that it will be always in a human body. It can be anything. Yeah.
So the understanding of the Atman and its relation to the body and the mind, it differs in different faith traditions. So in faith traditions where there is no emphasis or understanding of the Atman, some of the aspects of Maya and Jnana does not apply to them at all.
What, like give an example.
In Islam and Christianity, or even Buddhism and Jainism, and at least in Jainism and other traditions, where there is no, at least in faith traditions where there is no belief in reincarnation and the Atman and the super consciousness and the self, the aspect of Maya and some of the aspects of Jnana Yoga do not apply to them.
No, but the thing is this, that's a whole different paradigm. Now, is the Atman and Maya, does it have an ultimate reality? No. See, this is only a conceptual framework. The truth is truth. Now, in order for me to understand the truth through my intellect, I'm creating these concepts, with the concept of the body, the mind, the Atman, Maya. Now, this is only a framework to understand the reality. Now, Islam or Christianity will have a different framework. Now, they have things in that framework which are not present here. Now, a framework is only a framework. Like Ramakrishna said, if you want to climb onto the roof of a house, you can use the stairs, you can use an elevator, you can tie a rope and go. Now, the goal is to go on the roof. Ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you have used stairs to go up or an elevator to go up or a rope to go up. Because ultimately they don't matter at all. So similarly, I'm not suggesting, or it's not meant that one definitely needs to have an idea of the Atman or Maya in order to become enlightened. It's possible to become free even without this, but you have some framework. Use some conceptual framework to figure out what's going on and be free. That's fine. So everyone doesn't need to have this. In fact, the religious dogmatism, fanaticism comes from the idea that my conceptual framework is the only possible framework. And all other frameworks are bad and wrong. That's fanaticism. But others can say, for me, this framework works. That's fine. If some other framework works for somebody else, that's wonderful. That's great. That shows, that's what Ramakrishna meant when he said, as many faiths, so many paths. That's the idea.
Yeah, Swami, what you said here is that mysterious clouding of the intellect is Maya.
Yeah.
Now this question may be too much earlier for what we will discuss later. How to remove this mysterious clouding of the intellect?
How to remove? That's why we have gathered here. Yes. No, it's a very good question. First of all, we have to know how it came. If we know how it came, then we can kick it out the same way. So we are just not trying to figure out first how it happened. Because if we know how it happened, then undoing that is easy. Yeah. You want one more question? Go ahead, don't feel shy.
I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry. I'm happy you're asking the question.
Yeah, all throughout this very magnificent talk, my thoughts kept on concentrated on my mom, particularly because I know it's also like hyper about me. But yes, my particular question is here would be, so what about affection? You said that one can see the human body that can be interacted with, right? Even the mind and the brain. So you talked about the body, the mind, the consciousness and the Atman, which cannot be seen. So when you talk about sense and emotion like affection of one person to another, in this case like me with my mom, then which part of the categories that you talked about, the body, the mind, the consciousness, or the Atman, would you ascribe that to?
It's the mind, I would think. It's the mind, yeah. Because the Atman is just pure consciousness. Atman doesn't do anything at all. It's just there. It's like light. Electricity, the power, electric part doesn't do anything. If you attach it to a fan, it will give you air. If you attach it to a bulb, it will give you light. But electricity is just electricity. So consciousness, the Atman simply is. The Atman manifests through the body. Through the body, through physical activity. Through the mind, through its intellectual activity, emotional feelings. All of this become possible because of the Atman. But the Atman itself doesn't do anything.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and where Maya comes in is, when the Atman doesn't do anything, it still feels I'm doing everything. That's ignorance. So to do everything and not do it. There is a story I'll tell you. In Krishna's life, well, there's a story about, there's all these gopis, and then once these gopis were, they were milkmaids and they had to carry milk and butter and all of that and sell it. So once they had to go to a nearby village to go and sell all those milk and all. And the story is they had to cross a small river. And that river had a small bridge over it, and that bridge had collapsed. And they were not able to cross the river. And there's this sage Vyasa sitting there on the bank of the river in deep meditation. But they had to go and deliver all that milk products on the other side. So they then requested this sage and said, could you please do something? And then he said, our rishis were great in many ways. So he said, first of all, I'm hungry. So he said, if you can give me a little bit of milk. And so they said, okay. So he drank some milk and butter and everything he had. And after this nice meal, then he gets up and with folded hand looks at the river and says, if I have not eaten anything, please make way for this. And then the river made way. And these people are like, right in front of us you have eaten all this. And now you say, if I have not eaten anything. I mean, the story is told to show that when I say I'm eating something, what is exactly happening? You see, think about, say, there is a laddu. I'm saying, I'm eating this laddu, I say. Now, a laddu is nothing but material objects. It's a particles of matter, atoms and molecules. It's being held in this hand, and we know the chemical composition of the body also. So we know this is also nothing but atoms and molecules. and this is now being put here, and it goes here. So it's just these atoms and molecules of the world. One section of it is called laddu. The second section of it is called the hand. It's going put inside this mouth. It goes inside the stomach. All this is nothing but a jumble of atoms and molecules. And then, how do I feel I am eating it? Where does this I come in? No, that's Maya. That's where the problem is. Now, if I can just look at this and say, yes, sure, it's this hand that is holding this thing called the book, and this knowledge is going, and then this thing. I can look at all of these things objectively and know that none of this is really me. That would be knowledge. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Swamiji, forgive me if I am redundant in my question, okay? But who is in charge of this Brahman?
You! You are Brahman.
But who is in charge of it? Because I don't think I have done anything to become what I am today.
That's because of Maya. That's it. We'll see. We'll have more chance to discuss it later. So I think we can stop here today, and then tomorrow we can discuss this further. A lot of things we can discuss this evening. All right. You want to do some shloka or something? We have 5 minutes.